Hello and welcome to the 8-man Nightmare Mode Kephess The Undying Boss Fight Guide. My name's Hayete, and today I'll be covering everything you need to know to successfully complete the 4th fight in the Terror from Beyond operation. For this encounter, we suggest you bring a standard composition of 2 tanks, 4 DPS, and 2 healers. However, any class composition will be more than capable of beating this fight. In this guide, I'll only be covering the Nightmare-specific mechanics and strategies. If you need the foundational mechanics and strategies, please take a moment and check out our hard mode version guide before continuing. That will get you up to speed on everything you need to know prior to watching this guide. So unlike the hard mode DPS analysis, when analyzing the Nightmare DPS requirements, I made some changes to include more specific variables. With that said, here you'll see this analysis and its results. Each phase of the fight was considered in this analysis. Phase 1 is the same as hard mode, in that it will auto-push into Phase 2 after 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Phase 2 was calculated based on the number of pylons available and the nanite mechanic using a 3 nanite per pylon variable. Phase 3 is purely an estimated amount of time to finish the encounter. All of this represents an estimated worst-case scenario situation. Ideally, each phase will be much shorter than represented here if mechanics and strategy are done properly. Okay, so on that note, let's cover the mechanic differences new to Nightmare. Number 1. Energy distortions. All mechanics inherent to these adds are still the same as in hard mode. However, in Nightmare, you now will need to deal with 3 of these instead of 2. Number 2. Laser blast. This mechanic has gone unchanged except for the minimum distance required. New to Nightmare, there is now a yellow telegraph which denotes the maximum range required to properly drop a pylon. Number 3. Corrupted nanites. Similar to the energy distortions, in Nightmare, corrupted nanites now attach to 3 people instead of 2. Furthermore, the refresh time on corrupted nanites has decreased from 15 seconds to 12 seconds. Alright. Now let me explain the strategy to use around these new mechanics. More or less, the fight runs very similar to hard mode. As you initiate the encounter, you'll want to do everything as you would in hard mode. The energy distortions will require a bit of pre-planning by your group though, specifically your DPS. Energy distortions spawn in a manner relative to the location of Kephess. Depending on where Kephess is located, one distortion will be close, while the other 2 are far away. There are several strategies for dealing with these in Nightmare, so I'll touch on a few of them and then leave it up to you to decide which will work best for your specific group composition. With a balanced group, we recommend having 1 melee DPS pick up the close distortion, and your 2 ranged players pick up the far distortion. Since the distortions spawn shortly after laser blast, all group members should be stacked. If this is the case, you can assign your ranged DPS to always take a distortion on either the left or the right oriented from Kephess's location. You can use this strategy for ranged or melee heavy groups. Just keep in mind that any melee player going out for a far distortion should immediately move back to the boss after aggroing it in the event they are selected for laser blast. Another option is to have your tanks deal with the close distortion and not a melee or another DPS player. To effectively use this strategy, the tank would need to aggro the distortion and be the primary focus of Kephess. As the tank gains the overcharged debuff and runs into the hypergate void to clear it, the distortion will die. So a few tips when dealing with these distortions. Shadows, assassins, scoundrels, and operatives can use their stealth out abilities to clear a distortion. Sages and sorcerers can use force barrier to remove distortions. That's good information for those classes, especially the healing specs, who would likely be unable to defeat a distortion if one was acquired. Lastly, I want to mention Laser Blast, as in Nightmare it does a considerable amount of damage. You should always have raid members selected for this mechanic use a defensive cooldown, and healers should be focused on them very closely. This mechanic, unmitigated and not properly healed, can 2 or even 3 shot a player. If you happen to have any guardians or juggernauts, they can stand between the player and Kephess and use Saber Reflect to completely negate all the damage to the selected player and put all that damage back on Kephess. As you move into Phase 2, you'll run this very similar to Hard Mode. Nanites will stack, you'll avoid Barrage and Dread Bombs, and drop Pylons on Kephess. The difference here for Nightmare Mode is the rate at which the Nanites go out and the amount of damage that they do. However, due to the timing of the mechanics, there is a set pattern that can be used and if done properly, will yield the best success. So for your first Pylon, you'll start the channel immediately on the second set of Nanites that goes out. For Pylon 2, you'll need to stack your group and wait until Kephess jumps for Dread Bomb. As Kephess jumps, do not have the player with the red telegraph move. Have all raid members move away from the damage area, that way the boss remains at the Pylon. The damage done by Dread Bomb is significant in Nightmare, so ensure you use a defensive cooldown if you're selected. Furthermore, the telegraph can be misleading, and you can take damage if you're too close to it. If you're avoiding the circle, ensure that you're at least 4 meters from it so you do not take the damage along with the selected player. Anyway, as soon as Kephess lands, channel the Pylon and drop it. The third Pylon can be done either at 1 stack of Nanites or 2, depending on the strength of your DPS. If DPS is low and you need a 4th Pylon, wait for Dread Bomb and then channel immediately, same as with Pylon 2. We highly suggest dropping either your 3rd or 4th Pylon on Kephess at 10%. This will give you a buffer to DPS him down prior to entering Phase 3. The last thing I want to mention for Phase 2 is the radioactive barrage mechanic. In Nightmare, the radioactive barrage may target a player, but head towards another. We were unable to determine the reasoning behind this issue during testing, but it is definitely something your group should be aware of. When radioactive barrage comes out, make sure the selected player still moves away from the group, but if you see it going towards someone else, call it out and have raid members keep away from it. As you move into Phase 3, you'll handle this the exact same as in Hard Mode. So that's the fight, guys. I think the things I see messed up here the most are the Nanites and properly setting yourself up for success using the Pylons to squeeze out extra damage as you push in the next phase. As long as your group is able to get these things right, this is more or less the Hard Mode fight with a bit higher damage output. So that's all I've got for you guys. If this video was helpful, please pay it forward and help us by dropping us a like, and if you want, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. We release new videos almost weekly, and we've got a lot more guides coming for you guys. So if you're not a subscriber, hit subscribe, and you'll be the first one to know about all of that new content as it drops. Let us know in the comments section if you have any tips, tricks, or anything else I may have missed for this fight, and let us hear your success stories on this fight if this guide helped you beat it. So again, thanks guys, and enjoy the fight.
Look, Sadik. Other things,